Venerable members of the clergy, President Chandrika Bandaranayake Kumaratunga, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to be here on this occasion to speak a few words. I do not know whether I have the right to be here to speak at all. When seeing this assembly, I do not know whether I am worthy to address you all at all. However, since I have been honored most humbly, and I will try to speak my very best, although I think sati is a concept which is practiced by many here who know it far better than I do. However, providing me with this opportunity to speak to you all, to address you all, is an opportunity that I accept very humbly. Thank you. The Satipasana Foundation was founded under the spiritual guidance of Venerable Dhammajiva Mahathero and is ably supported by lay people from all over the world. They have taken this concept which promotes looking at one's inner self and the promotion of peace across the globe. It has expanded to non-Buddhistic countries as well that have embraced this concept, that have taken it on board. And for that, I think we owe a debt of gratitude to the Venerable Thero that is hard to repay in any context. The Satipasana itself commenced in Sri Lanka and in other parts of the world with a focus on bringing the principle of sati to the institutions of teaching and of learning, to the universities, to the schools and to the students. However, today the concept has broadened, and I am grateful that it extends not only to the institutes of academia, but to public servants, government officers, and to legislatures. I am hopeful that the legislature or the Parliament of Sri Lanka will have the great benefit of your wisdom and the wisdom of sati. I myself, in my own limited capacity, have been able to bring about sati workshops, both in my electorate in Polonnaruwa and also in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I must say that both experiences, both in the electorate of Polonnaruwa and in the Foreign Ministry, have been very rewarding, with many of the participants telling me later, when can we do this next? So I would like to make an appeal that Polonnaruwa, the schools of Polonnaruwa, the teachers of Polonnaruwa, as well as my Foreign Ministry staff, are ever ready to be more actively engaged in the discussion on sati and the programs conducted in relation to sati. Mindfulness, as you know, is an element that is a fundamental of the Buddhist teaching. But it is not something that the Buddhist teaching owns. If you take pre-Buddhist India, Pre-Buddhist India enjoyed centuries of spiritual practice and the practice of meditation, which is also a form of bringing the mind to one place, to one focus. Sati is just that. However, Sati differs from some other forms of meditation in one fundamental way. And this is, meditation generally has the emphasis on getting the mind to one particular focus by making one focus either on an object or a situation. Like, for instance, the inhalation and exhalation of breath. One focuses on that at the point where the air touches one's nasal tip, or the tip of one's nose, enters through one's nostrils, traveling through, while brushing one's nasal hair, into the nasal cavity. One focuses on the process of taking in of breath and the exhaling of breath. That is a process that one focuses. Or one can focus on a particular object, a lotus flower maybe, and meditate upon that. However, Sati differs from this in a fundamental way, and a way which is easy for lay people like ourselves, that one can do one's everyday chores while practicing Sati. One lives in the present, the here and the now, without getting involved in the situation. One is merely an observer. One practices Sati. One can practice Sati when one walks to the bus stand, when one is traveling to work, when one is cooking. Your total undivided attention into what you're doing and what is happening around you in the immediate context, and you perceive them with your senses fully. You experience that moment at that present time fully. That is the concept of Sati. Sri Lanka is supposedly the country that produces the finest tea. I've often wondered how many people have actually experienced a cup of tea. How many Sri Lankans? I believe many in this room must have. But how many Sri Lankans have truly experienced a cup of tea, not gulped it down? Gulping it down, maybe almost all 20 plus million of our population would have done that. But how many would have actually experienced a cup of tea? I know when I drink my cup of tea in my office, I don't do this always, I'm not mindful all the time. At least 80% of the time I'm not mindful. But when I am mindful, I think I am fully mindful. And when I drink my cup of tea, when I am mindful, I do not just drink the tea. When I pick up the cup, I feel the handle. I feel the texture of the handle. I feel the cup. I know what the cup is made of. I'm seated down in a chair usually. I know and I'm aware I'm seated. I feel the material of the chair at various parts of my body touching my skin. I experience that sensation of that material on the chair touching my skin. Before I drink my tea, I see the vapor or the smoke rising up from my cup. I feel the temperature in my office, which is usually air conditioned. And I feel the temperature in the cup, which is a different temperature. I see the color of the tea, which is a beautiful amber brown usually. And then I get its fragrance, which touches my nose before I start drinking that cup of tea. I feel its taste towards the end of that experience, but it's an ongoing experience, which I relish till I finish the cup. And that is how a cup of tea is experienced if you're mindful, I think. And I think in most things we do, if one is mindful, the reactions we get from others are also different. For instance, if I were to stand here and shout that my good friend Dr. Tara Dimel is one of the stupidest people I've ever met, she would not, I'm sure, stand back and shout at me, "You are even more stupid." Childish actions often get childish responses. We see this in Parliament all the time. I have seen many of my colleagues shouting at each other, one lot telling each other, "Your mismanagement of this government is appalling and unquestionable." The response usually is, "Oh, in your time you did worse, you did A, B, C and D." And in this exchange I always think to myself, sadly, nobody ever says, "Why couldn't we have done it better by doing this instead?" Nobody comes up with that constructive solution. Each is hell-bent on proving the other was worse. And this is the scenario that has been ongoing for a long time. How do we get out of this situation? How do we free ourselves of this situation? How do we rebuild our country, which suffered immeasurably during the last so many years of the war, that took so many lives? After the war, we saw, or we heard some people trying to say, "We have won the war." I was of the view, we never won a war. All Sri Lankans lost. Whether they were Sinhalese, Tamils or whatever, everybody lost in the war. The war ended. That is a fact, the war ended. But nobody won from the war. The whole country lost. Now that the country has lost, we must rebuild this country. And how can we do that if we are not mature? If we still go back to the old days of name calling, pointing fingers, and not looking into our inner selves. Yes, governments in the past may have done worse, but are we perfect? Have we done our best? That is what we should ask ourselves. That is what we should be asking ourselves. But instead we find excuses, we find reasons to say why we are so good and why everybody else is so bad. I am asked to speak about a mindful Sri Lanka. If we are to speak about a mindful Sri Lanka, we have to learn to leave the past where the past is. We can learn from the past, but not dwell in it, not live in it. We must live in the present time. We must live now. We are often plagued with the insecurities of what will happen in an uncertain future. We are thinking of possible scenarios that might happen tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, and how we are going to cope with them and meet with them, and what our reaction is going to be. We may be thinking of, if A meets me and says this to me, I will say this to A, but this scenario will never happen. But it is an imagined situation which is wasting our time, consuming our time. And it is an imagined situation that is not productive for anyone. The past is similar. Sometimes I do the same thing. You think of the past and say, when so and so told me this, I should have said this in return. But you cannot go to the past again and change that and say that. So it is just a waste of your time, really, trying to think of what could have happened in the past and also try to imagine what will happen in the future and what position we will take if that happens in the future. I think if one is mindful, one also needs to be mindful with a little bit of equanimity. Equanimity is that quality where you're neither affected too seriously by the so-called benefits and the fortune that you have, and you're not too seriously affected with the terrible disasters that you perceive. The Buddha himself referred to it, I believe, as samana sukha dukkha, to be able to take both the pluses and the minuses in one stride. I'm trying terribly hard, it's very difficult. But I'm able to deal with my losses better. I still find, if I were to think of the poem If by Rudyard Kipling, Rudyard Kipling, I believe, said something like, if you can meet triumph and defeat and treat both imposters just the same. And to me, still it's easier to meet triumph than disaster. However, I'm able to handle disaster better as I handle the last election result. Because I'm able to some extent, take it in my stride, at least to a point. It is something that comes with practice. Sati also needs practice. Like every good sport, I think of Sati as a sport. The more you practice it, the better you become at it. And so Sati is a concept that one needs to nurture and keep on practicing. And the more one practices it, certain things like being detached and observing comes naturally to you. But it is not without a fight. It is something one has to be conscious of and determined about. And eventually the goal becomes easier with practice and hard work. So in Sri Lanka, there are many areas where we can develop from the concept of Sati. In Parliament, we can perhaps reconcile with each other. We cannot just shout abuse at each other, but say things which are constructive, which both sides may someday be able to agree on, the government and the opposition. If we can agree on things, how do we improve our country? Not on how we win the next election, but how do we take the country forwards for all Sri Lankans? Maybe we can agree on national policies. Some countries, even India, has national policies on certain aspects. We have national policies on nothing. But don't we need national policies? On agriculture, on our foreign policy, on so many aspects. If we can come to agreement, I think our development is much easier. I think one of the reasons this is so difficult for us to proceed in the developing world is that there is so much focus on each other's political success, but there's little agreement on the national interest. And I think if one were to take a step back and look at it from the point of view of Sati, I think one would be able to put one's nation and the people one was elected to represent before oneself. That, I think, is the ultimate goal, and that is what we as politicians were elected for. If we think of the oath we took, we do not take an oath to enrich ourselves. We do not take an oath to empower ourselves. We do not take an oath to perpetuate ourselves in power. We take an oath for our country, to develop our country, to work for the interests of our people. That is what Sati will help us to do, if as parliamentarians we choose to do it. Therefore, I see Sati as an invaluable concept that can reconcile a country that was torn by war, that can reconcile political parties that only know to hate. Sati can also help in eradicating and eliminating stress-related diseases. So we know that a lot of ailments, whether it be diabetes, whether it be hypertension, whether it be arthritis, whether it be allergies, asthma, most of these conditions are caused, if not are aggravated by stress. A follower of Sati may not be entirely free of stress, but is able to cope and deal with stress better than most others. And in the context of Sri Lankan society today, we see a country which is riddled with all sorts of sicknesses, diabetes, hypertension, sicknesses that were not so prevalent in the previous generation are very prevalent today. Again, Sati can help in our global view about the planet that we live in. Today we pollute the planet indiscriminately. Our seas and water bodies, plastics and microplastics everywhere. This gets into our food chain, has got into our food chain. Tiny particles of plastic have also been found, according to the latest research, even in the Mariana Trench, the most deepest part of the ocean. So it is everywhere. And we still continue to pollute our planet more and more. But if one were to take a step back and look at this as a detached observer, one would see it is not entirely about oneself. It is also about all humanity and all the other life forms that inhabit this planet, not only about humanity itself. Therefore, Sati can teach us so much. It can enrich us so much. But one needs to view the world in the present situation from a detached point of view. Now I want to end this with a beautiful, in this discussion, a beautiful story that I read in a book that I read many years ago. It's to do with two Zen monks, two Zen Buddhist monks that had come to a bridge, and it was a tiny footbridge, and both monks had taken a vow that they were not to engage in any contact with women. And when they came to this tiny narrow bridge across a gushing river, there was this most beautiful young woman in front of the bridge. And the beautiful young woman told the two monks, "Can you please help me cross the bridge?" Now the two monks looked at each other, and the older, more experienced monk, without saying a word, went up to the woman, carried her, and laid her on the other bank. And then the two monks continued on their journey. The younger monk looked at the older monk, said nothing. They travelled for half an hour, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 2 hours, both saying nothing to each other. 2.5 hours, after 3, the young monk, unable to contain himself, said, "We have taken a vow and you carried that woman." And the older monk said, I carried her across the bridge and left her on the bank. You are still carrying her? So this is a point that illustrates that one must not only live in the present, one must be an observer, not an involved participant. Because the moment one gets involved, one's thoughts color the entire situation. And when one's thoughts and prejudices color a situation, it is no longer a pure situation which one can judge. And then it, of course, goes back to old prejudices one has, and it takes you back to the past again. So one must always live in the present. One must always be non-judgmental. That is the fundamentals of sati as I understand it. And as honored as I was to have been able to come and speak today a few words on the request of the Global Mindful Summit which invited me, I hope I have done justice in this short space of time in which I spoke these words. I hope this has been productive. But I wish to thank all of you for nevertheless indulging me. Thank you.